Hello, in this video we're going to cover some common misconceptions about the ACT that I found over my time as a tutor and looking around on the internet about what things people believe is true about the ACT, but really it's just not. So hopefully we can set the record straight and help you understand the truth in this video. As always, if you find this helpful, leave a like, subscribe to help me out, and comment with anything you'd like to see more of or what you do or don't like about my videos. So let's get right into it. First misconception, you only take the test once for the ACT. Turns out actually many people have to take the test multiple times to achieve their target scores. I believe last time I checked from the ACT's website, the statistics were about 48% of people take it multiple times. And most of those that do better the next time. And keep in mind that 48%, while it's less than half, most of those people, or a lot of those people, probably believe this, where you only are supposed to take it once. But in my experience, from actual tutoring, with people actually paying to try and achieve target scores, which are probably a little bit higher, almost all of those students require taking it multiple times if you're trying to get actually higher scores. Whereas those that don't often take more of the approach of my score is my score and whatever I get is what I get, and we'll see if that's good enough. But if you're actually trying to target a specific score and prepare yourself, most likely you're going to have to take it more than once. That'll depend on what schools you're targeting, so figure out what range that they are typically looking for and what scores they accept most of the time. Take your practice test, see where you stand. So if you do take it multiple times, another nice thing there is it lets you take advantage of super scoring. That's a concept, if you're not familiar with it, where the colleges, if they super score, which most do, just double check that they do, they'll actually take all the tests that you submit to them and just pick out the highest scores from each section that you ever got. So if you did really well on English and math on the first test, and then not so great on reading and science, but then on two other tests, for one of them you did good on reading, or did well on reading, and on the other one you did really well on science, you'd submit all three of those, and the college would just take your best across all of them, and you'd have a really high score across all four. And because of that, you can actually, if you're willing to, start taking the ACT before you're fully prepared. So if you've kind of got maybe two or three of those sections down where you're pretty consistently getting high scores, if you want, you can start registering to take the test and maybe get one of those high scores locked in. And if you get really high, it might be able to pull up whatever your poorer score is. Maybe you get lucky on the one that's a little bit harder for you. Or if not, most likely you might just do well on the ones that you were prepared for, and then you'll have that score locked in and you can just then focus on whatever was left. The other reason why this often happens is because the scaling for your score, it's going to vary between each test because it's all scored on a curve. So sometimes that section is going to be more forgiving than other times. There's also going to be an element of luck involved. As much as you hate to admit it, it's there. You're going to have some good days and you're going to have some bad days for each section. You might just make a lot of math errors. Maybe you're tired by the time you get to science and make a lot of silly mistakes. Maybe they get to the math section and they happen to test those things that you didn't really prepare for a lot more than normal. Maybe you get that reading comprehension passage where you just have no idea what's going on. Those things happen. It's unfortunate, but they do happen. So by preparing yourself to take it multiple times, you're going to be okay with these situations, and you can use super scoring to make up the difference. And it's never a wasted test if you can do well on just one section. And even if you don't, that's experience to help you get ready for the next time. Next big misconception is the belief that you should naturally be prepared to take the test after your junior year. Because sure, in an ideal world, the whole point of this test is just to measure where do you fall, what do you know after junior year, roughly. However, if you're actually trying to get a specific score, you're going to find that most people can't hit those scores without specifically studying and practicing the ACT. Again, that will depend on what colleges you're targeting, so look up their ranges that they typically see. Take a practice test so you know where you stand. If you're already in that range, you might actually be okay, but a lot of people are not for various reasons. In my experience, I found that punctuation and grammar rules are often poorly understood. This will change depending on what school you're from, the school system, your own personal background and strengths, but people often have a rough idea of what sounds right, but they don't really understand the rules behind punctuation and grammar, and that's what's going to be tested. Then there's sections like reading comprehension and science that are unique, and generally they're going to take experience for you to do well on those, because there's not really something you can study to just learn what's tested. It's more about, do you know how to handle this section, which you can only get through practice. As for math, there's a lot of stuff that can be tested. Some of it you most likely haven't learned. Other things that probably you did learn, but you've forgotten. So you're going to need to touch back up on those and study either way. So put all this together, you're probably not going to be able to just go right in after junior year and take it blindly and get the scores you want. Next is, along those lines, the belief that you should wait and take the ACT either during, after, or towards the end of your junior year. It is true that that's the most common time that people take the test. I don't recommend that you wait that long for a few reasons. First of all, most likely you will have learned already the vast majority of the material after sophomore year. There's still going to be a little bit, most likely, that you're going to pick up in junior year, but not much. So you can already start doing well after sophomore year, and you can usually fill in that last little bit of the math, typically, or whatever it is you haven't learned, yourself, if you have to. As for junior year, if you try and do it either during the end of junior year, well, that's typically the busiest year in high school. And that's where you have usually your hardest classes, a lot of AP tests, and AP exams. And that means you're going to be trying to prepare for the ACT while also trying to prepare for your tough finals, your AP exams, all at the same time. That is very challenging. If you decide, okay, I'll get junior year done with and start studying in the summer, well, now you're not going to have a lot of time to study. You'll have very few chances to actually take the test and take advantage of super scoring. And if you do end up pushing that into the fall or winter, you're going to be balancing not only classes again of your senior year, but college visits and college applications all at the same time. So you can really kind of get a lot of things going on all at once if you put it off till junior year. Instead, if you start after sophomore year, you're going to have way more time to practice and to study. You'll be able to get that necessary experience for sections like reading comprehension and science, get that pacing under control, and you'll have a lot of opportunities to test multiple times if you're okay with that and take advantage of super scoring, which you wouldn't be able to do as much if you wait till your junior year. The next belief is that when you are preparing, you're just going to see constant, steady improvement along the way. That would be lovely, and sometimes that does happen, but often there's going to be phases of jumps and plateaus where you're just kind of stuck at a score range and it feels like you're not making any progress, but stick with it and then you're going to see a jump eventually. In fact, when you're first starting out, it can be a lot harder to improve your score. It's going to take more improvement as far as number of questions answered correctly to get your score to go up. And I'll show you what I mean on the next slide with some numbers. So be ready for that. It might actually be more challenging right off the bat. And don't get frustrated even if you do start seeing improvement and then stop or things suddenly slow down at some point. That's typically what's going to happen to most people. It's still going through these phases. So just keep studying, try and figure out what it is that's causing you trouble. It might be pacing, it might be concepts, you might be falling for trap answers. My videos in each section will cover each of these things and how to handle them, so that we can be more focused in trying to tackle what the problem is. So, like I said, you might actually have a harder time increasing your scores right off the bat. And here's why. Because here is an example from the 2020 ACT practice test and its scoring scale. If you don't know how to use this for each section, let's say reading, we'll go here as an example. These would be the questions on how many you got correct. So if you got 33 questions correct, you go here to 33, and you go off to a side, and 31 would be your score. So that's how you read this. You could also read to the left because that's closer to English or math. So they put it on both sides, but they're the same. And what you'll find, let's look over here at the English. Look down here at all these lower scores. Notice they all have ranges, 33 to 35, 36 to 37. 40 to 41, 42 to 44. So let's take this one as an example since I'm on it. If you had 42 questions right the first time you ever took it, you'd have a 20. If you wanted to increase that score just 1 point to a 21, you wouldn't have to get one more question right. You'd have to get 3 more right to get up to 45. Yet if you were up here where you're getting 59 right and this time you got 3 more questions right, your score would go up 1, 2, 3 points. Where you're in this range here, where one more question right or wrong will change your score. So while that's a bit of a double-edged sword where it's less forgiving in this range, so if you make a mistake, it's going to hurt you more than it does down here, it's easier to climb as well, because to get from a 30 to a 31 in this particular English, you just have to get one more question right. This is especially true in reading and science, where there's fewer questions, so you're not going to see as much of these ranges, but up here you're going to see a lot more of this unforgiving area, or even these gaps, where let's say you got 33 right here, and now you got one more right to a 34, your score would jump a whole 2 points instead of just one. And that's just because there's fewer questions, so there just can't be as much of a range. So they're going to vary a lot more, so you're going to have less consistent scoring. But you'll find here that it can be easier to climb once you start seeing that improvement, but it's going to go up and down. But anyways, let's move on to the next point. Good grades in school mean the ACT is going to be easy, right? That makes sense. Not exactly true. Many of my students with great grades in school would come in. I'd give them their ACT to just try blindly without any practice, and they're pretty surprised by how low their scores are. A few reasons that can happen. First of all, the ACT is very different from most of your school tests. So all of the stuff you've done before isn't really relevant, other than some of the concepts you've learned. There's a lot of unique factors that are required to do well on the ACT that take specific preparation, like that reading and science that I've been talking about, like those grammar rules that you probably didn't learn exactly, some specific weird math stuff that they like you to know. You're only going to get that through preparation for the ACT specifically. So just because you're good in school doesn't necessarily mean you're instantly going to be great on the ACT. It does give you an advantage. You'll often start out a little higher, but you're still going to have to work your way up most of the time. Next, colleges must be listed when you register to send the scores, and all scores are sent to schools. So this comes from the fact that when you go to register for the ACT, you're given the option to list the schools, as in colleges, that you're interested in, and then they're going to automatically send those scores off to you. And that's true, and that can be helpful, but it's not required. You don't have to list them if you're not sure what schools you want to go to, if you're not feeling too confident and don't think you're going to do well and just want to get the chance at a high score for your super scoring. You don't have to list the schools. When it comes time to actually apply for college, you can also go in and request for each test if you want that test to get sent to whatever school and just list it. And you can choose then what tests you want to send and what schools you want to send them to. You're always going to send the whole test, just so you know, not individual sections, but that doesn't matter. They're only going to take them all and combine them to get the highest from each section. So you just want to send the ones that contain the highest from each section. So at most, that would be 4, just to give you an idea. Just do know that there is a fee for this, for each one that you send out. So check the ACT's website to see how much that is and fit that into whatever your financial situation is with your family, because everyone's in a different spot. And to do this, you can either go to the ACT's website itself where you register, and that's where you can make these requests. Or if you're applying through something like the Common App, they'll often have something built in where you just put in the information and they'll make that request for you. All right, the last two here have to do with the SAT versus the ACT, and they're pretty similar. So this first is the belief that the SAT is the main or the preferred test, and therefore the ACT is either inferior or it's really just there for those people that love math and science. This mostly just comes from the fact that the SAT was developed first, so that's why they think it's the main one, because if you go back several years, there were going to be a lot of higher end, primarily colleges, that would only accept the SAT and not the ACT, or they might only superscore the SAT, but they won't superscore the ACT. It's now very rare that that's the situation. Most colleges are going to accept both and superscore both if they superscore, which most do. Definitely check that against your college list, just in case you choose one of the very, very few that won't superscore or specifically won't superscore the ACT. But that's very rare. Now, it is true, covering this whole math and science is what the ACT is for. It's true that the ACT covers more advanced math concepts, and it has a science section that the SAT does not. But that does not mean the SAT is better for those that like math or don't like math and science. So you might see this and think, oh, hard math and a science section, this is great for math science people, but bad for non-math and science people. Not necessarily true. Because that science section in the ACT, that tests your ability to read graphs and tables more than actual science knowledge. So just because you're great in science class doesn't mean you're going to be so great on the ACT science section yet without some practice, and vice versa. Just because you're not so good at memorizing chemistry and all of that science stuff, not really being tested. You just have to learn how to read graphs and tables and then just a few small science concepts that I cover in my videos. As for the math actually is only going to take up a quarter of the ACT. Yes, it'll have some more advanced math concepts, but it's only a quarter of the test. But it's half of the SAT. There are 2 math sections. So if math isn't your thing, you're going to have to find a way to do well for half of the entire SAT with that math. And not only that, but on the ACT, the math allows you to have your calculator the whole time, and it's all multiple choice. So even if you don't know how to do it, maybe you can let your calculator help you, or you can at least guess and maybe get it right. The SAT has a non-calculator section and several fill-in answers where it's not multiple choice. You have to write it all out and then write the answer you get. So if you don't know how to get that one, you will get it wrong. There is no guessing. So put all that together, and those that aren't strong with math might actually be better on the ACT even though it has more advanced math concepts. So similar to that is the belief that the ACT is harder than the SAT. And that belief, just like the last one, comes from just being more familiar with the SAT, because that's what's been around. They might have taken the pre-SAT. So when they go and try the ACT, it's different. And that makes it harder the first few times just because you don't know what you're doing. You also might be intimidated by that science section that you haven't seen before. You probably haven't read a lot of scientific journals, and so those passages look tough until you figure out what they're actually testing and how to handle them. And then there's the factor that, as I said before, the ACT material will stretch into more advanced concepts, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's harder. So, I already covered that SAT has some extra challenges with the math on the previous slide. On top of that, the SAT tends to have more inference questions, more read between the lines kind of questions, or answers where you have to choose between the best available option. So there might be a few that could all work, but which one's really better than all the others? These are much harder to answer correctly and much harder to answer consistently correctly. Additionally, that advanced concept stuff, different for everybody, but often students have forgotten a lot of the earlier concepts that are only on the SAT. So while they're technically easier, you've already forgotten them. And so actually, the more recently learned advanced concepts of the ACT are easier for them because you just learned it, so it's already fresh on your mind. And then finally, very importantly, is the superscoring aspect if you do take advantage of it and take the test a few times. They both superscore, but it's much more helpful in the ACT. Here's why. The ACT gives you 4 superscores. Every section gets its own score, and they all have their own superscore. So if you do well on just one of the 4 on a testing day, you just got a super score. You don't have to worry about that section anymore. The SAT, there are 4 sections, but only 2 super scores because they combine the scores from your reading comprehension and writing and language. That, by the way, is the same as the English section of the ACT, into 1 super score. And then they take both of your math sections, the calculator and non-math calculator math section, and combine that into 1 math score. So you only end up with 2 super scores. And what that means is you have to do well on both of the combined sections to get a good score. for your super score. So let's say you ace the reading comprehension section one day, do really well, but then you don't do so great on the equivalent of the SAT English section. You just wasted that great reading comprehension day because it got averaged in with your bad English. So you have to go and try again and do well on both of these on the same day to get a good super score. Whereas the ACT, you just have to do well on one of them to get a good super score. And that is a very big difference. Now, that is to say, I just listed a bunch of things on why I generally like the ACT better and it has more advantages. It's not necessarily going to always be easier for everyone. The primary challenge for the ACT comes from pacing. The SAT is going to give you a lot more time per question than the ACT does. So know that going into it, this is going to be a big challenge for almost everybody, and you're going to have to find a way to control and master that pacing, which you can do, but it is going to be tough. Otherwise, the ACT does tend to be more straightforward. It's just a matter of can you actually get that done in time. So if you absolutely cannot get the pacing under control, then the SAT might be the better option for you. That's usually when the SAT ends up coming in as the better one. But that'll do it for this video. Hopefully that helped clear a few things up. If you found it helpful, leave a like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you on the next video.